What if I told you the Pawn Stars paid $35,000 for a Disney stock certificate that wasn't actually from the Walt Disney Company? Yep, it's signed by Walt himself. It looks official, and the expert says it could be worth up to $60,000. But once you dig a little deeper, the story gets a lot more complicated, and it might just be one of the most misunderstood deals the Pawn Stars have ever made. Let's break it down. So the Pawn Stars are on location in one of their Pawn Stars Do America episodes. A seller walks in with a rare capital stock certificate for WED Enterprises, issued to Sharon May Disney, Walt's daughter, in 1955. The certificate has been canceled, meaning it's no longer valid as an actual security, but it is signed by Walt Disney himself, which instantly makes it a valuable collectible. Corey brings in Steve Grad, their go-to autograph expert. Steve confirms the signature is real and estimates the value at $30,000 all the way up to $60,000 at auction. He says he has never seen anything like this and is not aware of any others in existence. Well, as it turns out, neither Steve nor Corey did their proper research here. And because of that, Corey ends up buying the certificate for $35,000. And he seems pretty happy about this deal. Given what Corey and Steve seem to think this certificate represents, you can see how they might feel pretty good about buying this for that price. Well, here's where it gets interesting. I did some digging, and here's what I found. There were only 20 original WED Enterprises stock certificates, and just 6 were signed by Walt himself. The rest were either signed by others, like one from 1964 signed by William Cottrell, president of WED Enterprises at the time, or never issued at all. So far, so good for Corey. So yes, it's rare, very rare, but rarity alone doesn't always equal value, especially when people don't fully understand what they're buying. And that's exactly what seems to have happened here. The show presents this as if it's part of the Walt Disney Company, implying that if the certificate hadn't been canceled, it would be worth billions. But that's simply not true. So how do we know they overpaid? Because I found a direct comparison, and it's a big one. Another WED Enterprises certificate, created on the exact same day as the one from the show, sold at auction in 2019. But this one wasn't issued to Sharon Disney. It was issued to Walt Disney himself. And it wasn't for just a few shares. It was for 142.5 of the 150 total shares available in the entire company. And the final price? $19,000. Let me say that again. The certificate issued to Walt Disney himself, with a value of nearly the entire company, sold for $19,000. And Corey paid $35,000 for a certificate issued to Walt's daughter. And this transaction was just a few years later. So unless a private collector stepped in with deep pockets and emotional ties, this one feels like a stretch. It just seems reasonable to me that one issued to Walt himself would be worth more money, even though it was sold a few years prior to this Pawn Stars transaction. To really understand why this matters, you need to know what WED Enterprises actually was. It wasn't the Walt Disney Company. In fact, WED Enterprises was a completely separate, privately owned company created by Walt himself in 1952. Originally named Walt Disney Inc., it became WED Enterprises in 1953, to avoid confusion with Walt Disney Productions, the larger company we now know as the Walt Disney Company. Walt Disney Productions equals the Walt Disney Company. Keep that in mind. WED Enterprises was Walt's personal design and engineering firm. The group started in part to design and create Disneyland, as well as certain attractions like the railroad, the monorail, and more, and they maintained the rights over these attractions. It also held the rights to Walt's name and likeness. This allowed Walt and his heirs to profit directly from Disneyland, while still working within the larger Disney ecosystem. By 1965, the conflict of interest between WED Enterprises and Walt Disney Productions had gotten too big to ignore. Walt Disney Productions demanded that WED sell off certain assets and change its name entirely. But here's the twist. They didn't just dissolve the company. Walt Disney Productions actually kept the WED Enterprises name, turning it into a wholly owned subsidiary that continued the design and engineering work for the theme parks. In that division, it would eventually evolve into what we now know as Disney Imagineering, officially adopting that name in 1986. So yes, the WED Enterprises name survived all the way until 1986, but the ownership and function shifted dramatically from Walt's private venture to an internal Disney powerhouse. As for the private WED Enterprises, owned by the heirs of Walt, they changed their name to Retlaw, Walter spelled backwards. Despite the changes, Retlaw, the private company mostly created for Walt's heirs, continued to maintain rights over key attractions in Disneyland. Eventually, though, in 1982, Walt Disney Productions finally bought Retlaw's Disneyland's rights for good. Walt Disney Productions paid to Retlaw over 800,000 shares of the publicly traded Disney stock, worth around $42 million at the time. Roy Disney wasn't thrilled with this whole setup from the very beginning. He felt it created a conflict of interest. And he wasn't wrong. From 1955 to 1981, WED Enterprises, later Retlaw, charged $75 million to Walt Disney Productions for use of the assets they controlled. So, what does this all mean for their certificate on Pawn Stars? Well, it's not part of the Walt Disney Company's history the way people might assume. It's part of Walt's personal side business, designed to benefit his heirs. And while that's still fascinating, it means the item wasn't a share of Disney as we know it. The ownership this certificate represents wasn't absorbed into Disney. It simply doesn't, nor ever, represented ownership in the multi-billion-dollar Walt Disney Company we know today. It's more of a unique footnote in Disney history, and that seems to limit how much most collectors are willing to pay. So yes, it's signed by Walt, it looks really neat, and it's rare, but based on the only comparable public sale I could find, the one issued to Walt himself, and what this item actually is, this deal on Pawn Stars feels like an overpay. At the end of the day, the WED Enterprises certificate is still a cool piece of Disney history, but the price Corey paid, that's where the magic starts to fade. What do you think? Does this change your mind on what you thought this item should be worth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And of course, make sure to click that like button and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.